Hi, it's Miss Parrot, and this video is about the really real equation for photosynthesis. Now, you probably learned in middle school, and I even taught in middle school, that 6CO2 plus 6H2O yields C₆H₁₂O₆, that's glucose, and 6 oxygen. It's balanced, the ins are coming in, the outs are coming out, but this simplified version does not tell the whole story. It doesn't account for all the protons, electrons, and all the atoms. It's not supported by experimental evidence. If you want more detail on that, check out this video. And it gives no hints to the roles that each molecule plays in the whole process of photosynthesis. So if you are an upper level science student, AP, IB, college, this video is for you. So stick with me and I'll tell you about the real equation. This equation, 12H2O plus 6CO2 yields 6O2 plus 1 glucose plus 6 new water, is a much more accurate telling of the story of photosynthesis. It breaks down the the reactants and the products of the light reactions, and the reactants and products of the Calvin cycle and afterwards. And it accounts for all the particles and all the atoms. We're going to be taking an atom flow view, not just to understand the ins and outs of photosynthesis, but the actual mechanics. Stick with me, or jump ahead to whatever part of the photosynthesis process is confusing to you, or you just want to learn more about. All right, let's start with the light reactions. The light reactions start with photolysis, or light coming in and splitting water. That happens here in photosystem 2. So we have, again, 12 water coming in, and then when that splits, you're going to get 12 oxygen atoms that will pair up and become 6O2, which will leave the leaf as waste. Then it'll take even the hydrogens, the 12 hydrogens, and break those into protons, 24 protons, and 24 electrons. Because you have 24 hydrogens, 12 times 2. So you get 24 electrons and 24 protons. Next, we're going to go to the electron transport chain. These 24 electrons will flow through the proteins of the electron transport chain, powering the proton pumps that are also part of it, to get protons that are currently existing in the stroma of the cell, or the stroma of the chloroplast, up into the lumen to build a proton gradient in the lumen of the chloroplast. If you want a detailed description of the structure of the chloroplast and what happens in all the parts of it, check out this video. So protons are moving to the lumen. We've got a proton gradient building up here. All right. Then you've got those protons are going to go through ATP synthase. They're going to flow down just like a water wheel. And as that bottom portion of the ATP synthase turns, it's going to take 18 ADP, adenosine diphosphate, and 18 inorganic phosphate, stick them together, and make 18 ATP, adenosine triphosphate. These are our energy currency of the cell. And we need them to do the rest of photosynthesis. Now, of those protons, 12 are going to stick on to a molecule called NADP+, along with the 24 electrons that have flowed through the electron transport chain and powered those proton pumps. But before the electrons get to NADP+, they're going to go through photosystem 1 and recharge with energy from the sun. Then those high energy electrons, 24 of them, and 12 from that have flowed out of the ATP synthase, again, all starting from that water, are going to join NADP plus to form 12 NADPH molecules. These are going to take the H's over to the Calvin cycle that will later join with carbon and oxygen to become glucose. So that's what's happening here. So, right, we've got 12 NADP plus 24 electrons plus 12 H plus will make 12 NADPH. And we're going to be following all these particles as we move into the next step. Next is the Calvin cycle. Now, this is the part that your textbooks typically just kind of gloss over. And to me, like, this is where things were getting confusing, besides the fact that the water wasn't adding up at the beginning. So I like to think of it as the Calvin cycles, because you actually have to turn this wheel 6 times to get the products that you see on the right-hand side of the chemical equation. So you're going to start with 6 CO2, and what's going to be produced at the end of 6 turns is 12 G3P, which are 3 carbon molecules. They're like 3 carbons stuck together with some other O's and H's coming off of it. Then 2 of those G3Ps will come out. So 6 carbons here, 6 carbons here. Okay, and in the cytosol later, with our friend enzymes, they're going to go through another series of changes to finally make a glucose. So that's like the big picture. Now, let's get deep. As we know, Miss Parrott's drawing is limited, but I'm going to do my best to explain. So, again, it takes 6 turns of the Calvin cycle. Think of it like, like a locker. You got to turn it 6 times to make 2 G3P that will later stick together, 3 plus 3, to make C₆H₁₂O₆. This is happening in the stroma of the chloroplast. So remember, the stroma is a densely fluid-filled part of the chloroplast. It's got tons of electrons and protons and enzymes floating around. So, step 1, carbon fixation, which basically means us taking carbon out of the air and turning it into a solid molecule down here in, like, the plant. Okay, so how do you get CO2 out of the air and bring it to become glucose? Well, you need some friends. This is one of my ultimate friends. He's an enzyme called Rubisco. And he says, welcome CO2, have you met RuBP? Now, Rubisco is one of the few enzymes that like AP Bio really cares that you know. And that makes sense because it's the most abundant enzyme in the whole planet. So, because it is responsible for photosynthesis happening. So it joins, so it's going to bring a 5 carbon molecule called RuBP. So it's got 5 carbons. It's going to bring it, it's going to be like, hey, have you met CO2? Oh, and they're going to join, and become a 6 carbon intermediate. This is not glucose. No, this is just the beginning. All right. Then that 6 carbon intermediate is going to turn. It's going to, again, enzymes, hydrolysis, condensation reactions are happening all along the way. For details on enzyme catalyzed reactions and condensation and hydrolysis reactions, check out those videos. So our 6 carbon intermediate is going to turn into 2 molecules of what's called 3-PGA. How many carbons does it have? 3. So we got 2 of those. So again, still we have 6 carbons. Now we move into the next phase. So this is when our ATP and NADPH that we made over in the light reactions joins the Calvin cycle party. So remember, we're going to call this the reduction phase. So flashback to our chemistry class, reduction is gaining electrons. Okay, so this is when, so ATP is going to phosphorylate or stick a P on it, right? Phosphorylation, super sassy science saying for stick a P on it. It's going to stick a phosphate on there, which will give it the energy that it needs to change its structure. Okay, and then NADPH is going to add protons and electrons that it carried over, right, from the light reactions to form 2G3P. So our 3 PGA, or we had 2 space 3 PGA. That's the name. And those basically just get turned into different looking molecules, which are called G3P. These are the ones that are going to become glucose, and they have a phosphate on them. But it's not a carbon, so we're not going to get it with a finger. All right. That's the second stage. So at the end of this second stage of the Calvin cycle, after we turned it 6 times, 3, 4, 5, 6, you're going to get 12 G3P, right? You're going to get ADP plus inorganic phosphate after ATP phosphorylates. Those are going to go back to the light reactions to be recycled. You're going to get NADP plus because you've broken off your protons and electrons. And so that's going to go back to the light reactions in the thylakoid membrane to get recycled. Then you're going to have 12 electrons and 6 oxygens floating around in the stroma. What happens next? Oh, so exciting. Okay, this is where the real equation comes in. This is when we're going to get the formation of the new waters. So the product side waters, the waters that are made at the end, are not the same waters as the waters at the beginning, right? So you're going to have 6 O's from your 6 CO2, right? So glucose and G3P, it kept one of those oxygens, but one of them it released, okay? And so we're going to get that, and it's going to, because it's so electronegative, it is going to attract the electrons that are the 12 electrons from NADPH that are coming off that are not being stuck onto what will become glucose, and the other protons that are coming out of ATP synthase. So it's catching all those and forming 6 new water molecules. Hooray! Now, again, important to remember, there are many other intermediate waters because as we go through all these different series of reactions, there's enzymes involved. Some of these are hydrolysis reactions where you need to use a water. Some of them are condensation reactions where a water is going to come out. So even this 6 water at the end is a final net number. Then we've got those 2 G3Ps. Remember? 2 G3Ps will come out of the stroma, so out of the chloroplast altogether and into the cytosol of the whole plant cell. And it's here that our friend enzymes, new enzymes, will work together to remove the phosphates and stick those 3 carbon molecules together to get our final super glucose. That will be our energy storage until it's time to use that in cellular respiration. So, like I said, we're taking an accounting and atomic view. So let's just go through that again real quick as we summarize and wrap up. So we had 12 waters split or went through photolysis at the beginning. 6 O2 were released, right? That's 12 oxygen atoms, but now they're paired up. released, diffuse out. I'm breathing it in right now. The hydrogens, these 24 hydrogens will become, so those will become protons and electrons. The protons will become part of the gradient, the proton gradient that drives ATP synthase to make ATP. The 24 electrons will go through the electron transport chain, powering the proton pumps. It will get recharged in photosystem 1 and then become part of NA. So then those will become part of NADPH. What happens with the NADPH? Well, 12 of those electrons, so half of the ones, and 12 protons will end up as the H12 in C₆H₁₂O₆. The other 12 electrons will join with the other 12 protons that came out of ATP synthase, and those will join with the oxygens that were broken off at the beginning of the Calvin cycle from CO2 to become your 6 new product side waters. Then from our 6 CO2, the 6 carbons that are individual floating around CO2s will form eventually at the very end glucose. Half of the oxygens will also be part of that glucose molecule, and the other half of the oxygens are the 6 O's that catch these 12 electrons and 12 protons to form those new product side waters. So it's all part of that same process. So quick wrap up. The simple equation helps us know what goes in and what goes out, but it is incomplete and doesn't give us the whole story. What this equation does for us is give us greater understanding of the mechanics of photosynthesis and all of the reactions that are shown in this one little arrow. The mechanics include 12 water being split in the light reactions, more water than that being used in the Calvin cycle to drive all those series of changes, 6 new waters being formed from the release of one of the O's of CO2 and then the catching of the H's, right? And then in the cytosol, that's where 2G3P, with the help of enzymes, is going to finally become glucose. Everything's accounted for. The movement of the particles is seen. Photosynthesis is a superpower of all kinds of plants, algae, and other photosynthetic creatures. So if you aren't amazed by photosynthesis yet, just keep learning, because this is how life takes non-life, CO2, and water. I don't have a glass, but if I did, I would. And makes food that drives the existence of the vast majority of the entire living world as we know it. That's amazing. And it's so elegant. So, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel for more AP Bio content. If you have any comments, questions, or just want to leave an emoji, that is super helpful for the algorithm. Teachers, coming to you soon are some resources that go with this video, but I have Teachers Pay Teachers resources in my Know and Grow with Gnome stores available for you right now. So check that out and keep learning and keep growing. And we'll see you next time.